Robin, are you there?
I am here. Is this Barry?
Oh, I'm so delighted to hear from you. I had a tough first hour, insulting to my people in ways you have no idea. But let's go. You've got a book. If you can keep us. Now, let's start. What is human liberty? What's the classical form of human liberty? Let's get started that way.
Well, you're asking me a very big question, aren't you? Well, we know, if you were listening to this show, your listeners know that we're talking about our God-given, unalienable rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all of which really come down to the right to be left alone. And the reason I wrote this book is that, Jefferson told us that the final protection of liberty in America is informing the discretion of the people so that they may do what the Declaration of Independence says and take responsibility for maintaining these rights. And I wrote this book because it seems that we, as a country, haven't done that. And there are... Sorry, go ahead, Barry.
No, I get you. You're saying government management of the social order is in, deep contrast to the freedom to innovate, right?
Well, that's very true. And when you consider how much we, the people, have lost because we have allowed this slide from our founding principles, you might wonder why it is we would let this get done to us. And so I've written this book to answer that question because, there are hundreds of books out there as to everything that's wrong with the country, the principles, the rights that we have lost or indeed are losing. And indeed, there are many books about how much, what the good is and how our country should be. But there really isn't much out there that helps people understand that this gap between what people perceive to be so in America and what is actually happening in America. So I've written this to get into the neurology, the psychology, the cultural factors that are causing people not to see what is right in front of their eyes, with a view to enabling folks like us to better being able to help them see what is in front of their eyes.
Oh, thank God for your rational voice. Oh, gosh. Look, in short, what you're claiming is to possess volition. That means choice, folks. Is part of what it means to be a human being. But the regimes are opposing this. What do you mean?
Well, that is true. I mean, sure, elites, regimes, power, it's in its nature to oppose our enjoyment and expression of our natural rights, right? But you see, it has always been so in history, and especially in our Anglo tradition, which I kind of trace back to 1014 in the very first constitutional charter to limit government, which was the Anglo-Saxon Charter of Ethelred II. So we're in a 1,002-year-old tradition right now, of which 1776 was probably the pinnacle. And so
pinnacle of what? Look, the modern state really has no limit. Most of them have no limits to its power. What principle? All right, what do you mean by that?
Well, in that 1,002-year history, of which 762 years into which America was born, it seems to me that it has always been the case that culture has preceded politics. In other words, the elites, those who would govern and suppress our rights, have only been able to do so to the extent that the culture, i.e. we the people, our expectations and our demands and the way we perceive the world, has allowed them to do so. And usually in this 1,000-year history, and I think we're in another example of this in our time, Barry, when politicians, when power has overreached so far that they're not only eliminating or reducing our political rights on paper, but they are actually starting to touch the everyday lives of a critical number of human beings, of citizens, then the culture starts
You can't escape from this. Look, what you're saying is the modern state has no limits to its power. What modern state? What are they doing? Come on, expand.
Well, I think, as I said, I think there are hundreds of books out there as to what the government does and would do. So in a way, intellectually at this point, I'm not so sure that's as interesting as understanding how we trigger the stopping of this overreach of government. So
that's your book? That's the theme of your book?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, we got it. In short, you seek to end the government as we know it.
Oh, certainly I seek to end the government as we know it. Absolutely. And I would like at least, to start with getting to a government that is somewhat more like the one outlined in the documents on my wall that I am currently looking at, Barry, which are the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights.
Okay. You're saying ideally they were great, but it hasn't worked out that way. The intrusive state apparatus has kind of screwed it up.
Well, and this is, I think, what, the Declaration actually says this, right? Which is, it's up to we the people to maintain these rights, which is why Jefferson said, it's the action of the people that we require to protect our rights, and that's why people like me and people like you in the media have to inform the discretion, to use Jefferson's phrase, of the people, to help them see what is so, because, something I go into the book in some depth about is the fact that we don't see what is there. We see what we already know or expect to see, whether that is right or wrong. And if it is wrong, if our expectations are wrong, our paradigms through which we filter the world will cause us to see the world in a way that reinforces those false paradigms. And we see that all the time. So we who love our rights, we who kind of love the principles on which America were founded, we have to be able to understand that so that we can kind of subvert those paradigms that subvert our liberty and our true nature.
All righty. Now, don't get me wrong, but are you watching? I'm not, by the way. I'm doing everything to avoid watching the election. Are you watching it?
No, no, the problem with this election and this cycle is, even if you try not to watch it, you end up finding out about it because it's kind of everywhere. And that's kind of enough for me too, actually, to be honest.
Oh, gosh, it's repulsive, isn't it?
It is, rather.
You're going to get a crook no matter what. Either way, you get a crook. And, saying Trump is in some way different is so wrong. What are the prevailing political biases? We're trapped in this. What are they?
Sorry, say that. I didn't quite get the question, Barry. What are the prevailing political what?
It's in my phone for some reason. What are the prevailing political biases?
Oh, my goodness. Well, probably the most important one is the ultimate framing of left versus right. Because, left versus right, it's very misleading kind of a paradigm, right? Because just look at those words, left and right. Everything is to the left or to the right. So that gives us the illusion. I mean, when we use those words to describe physical things, everything is on your left or on your right. So we kind of subconsciously hear, when we hear those words about politics, that if you've heard from someone who identifies on the left and someone who identifies on the right, that you've heard all there is to hear about something. Well, we know that that's not true, right? Also, left and right are opposites. So we have this impression that when you hear from a Clinton and a Trump, or a Democrat and a Republican, right, that you've heard opposing views, and you have to take a side. But of course, that isn't true. Because the problem is that our country, our takedown of our rights and our liberties, is more a function of the 95% of all of the things that the left and the right tacitly agree about, right? Whilst they're pretending to oppose each other. And we have to be able to see that.
We aren't. That's the big problem. Look, you've got an intrusive state apparatus, and they're just seeking control in their own interest. How this is in any way anybody's interest is what you dive into in this book, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm looking at putting the brakes on that process of that increasing overreach. I call it the overreach of politics into the culture. And what I mean by that is, let's do a concrete example. NDAA, we've lost our rights to due process, for example, and nobody was marching on the street. That kind of just went by without much of a scream in any city in America. Why? Because unless you need due process and are experiencing it every day, you don't feel anything when you've lost it. And most of us don't need due process. However, when politics overreaches into things that are part of our everyday experience, if you like, more in our culture. So let's say if you're a Second Amendment guy and you go down to the range with your son every month, right? Then your experience of the Second Amendment of guns is part of your culture. On the left, maybe you want to smoke marijuana, right? And that's part of your subculture. When government can't help itself to interfere so much that they are touching these everyday experiences of people so that people actually feel that rights that they were experientially enjoying yesterday, they're not going to have tomorrow, then there's a coalescence of resistance. And
I can counter you a bit. What if you're into heroin? Is that a right too?
Well, I'm not making any claim as to whether we should be smoking drugs or doing. I mean, I'm anti-drugs entirely. No drug has ever passed my lips beyond caffeine and alcohol, occasionally. I'm not making a point about your right to these things.
You're saying it's free.
The
implication, look, tell me if I'm wrong, but you've got a vision here. We're going into a libertarian vision. All right?
No, I'm not making any political case, Barry. You misunderstand me. I'm saying that people resist tyranny when it touches their everyday life, rather than when they can only intellectualize it in the abstract. And I'm saying for different parts of our country, they experience, what they experience in their everyday life, and therefore what is going to cause them to resist the tyranny of government is different. So depending on your upbringing, where you are in the country, your political disposition, left or right, I'm not taking a stand on any of those positions. I'm just saying we, who care about our constitutional principles and our God-given rights, we need to understand the mechanisms by which people will resist tyranny. And they're different.
Have we got here, by the way, I'm going to make a claim for it. My little radio show, it has, who knows if it has any influence, but I've been saying don't vote. It's a scam. You're being sucked in. That's my stand.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I think reasonable people can be on opposite sides of that. I mean, to be honest, I don't think anything is lost by voting. And, look at what happened in England just last month, right? Brexit. The single biggest act of liberty that Europe has seen for at least 43 years was the result of a black and white vote, where 60 million British...
But apparently it was honest.
Say again?
Honest.
Honest?
It wasn't...
I'm losing you there, Barry. You're going to have to say that again.
And once again, I don't think the vote was rigged. I actually think the English people, in a slight majority, voted to get out of the EU.
I agree. There may be votes in this country, in the United States, that are rigged, but not all of them. And you can definitely affect change, certainly at the local level and the state level. And if we can build benches, as it were, of pro-constitution, pro-founding principles, politicians, or just people at the local and state level, over time, over a couple of generations, we can kind of move the dial. And that's what this book is about. How do we move...
Generations? You mean I'll be dead 50 years before this happens?
Well, I don't think... Well, look, there's more than one thing going on in the direction of liberty at any given time, right? A country is a complex system. So at a certain point, it's like putting the grain of sand on the pile, right? And at one point, there's one grain, and the whole thing has a catastrophic effect, like a high magnitude change. We don't know when that's going to be or what the cause is going to be. We don't know what the fault line in our culture or our politics is going to be that's going to cause people to actually... You know what? My friends with who are big on the Second Amendment, I often hear them say, we have to have our... the Second Amendment, we have to protect it, we have to have our guns so that we can stand up against a tyrannical government. And I agree with them. And then in the next breath they say, the government has become tyrannical. And I agree with them. So then I look at them and I say, okay, why are you still here? Why aren't you up in D.C. taking those guns out of the holsters and doing something about it, right?
No. We don't want to imply that you go shoot up anything. No. No. Again, Barry, you misunderstand me. I'm not telling people they should do that. I'm saying the inconsistency on its face should be obvious. And the reason I raise it is because at a certain point, people get triggered to act. And, experiments show, and they actually do this in behavioral economics experiments in laboratories, people will pay a price to themselves, a cost to themselves, to punish people who are unjust towards other people. And right now, our government is being unjust to increasingly large groups of Americans. And at some point, we will resist. And I don't know where that point is. How will we? I'm talking about, resist means constitutionally resist, right?
Right, well, the Declaration of Independence is clear.
Good. I get scared. I had a guest last time. Oh, my goodness. I'm afraid of people. I really am. And by the way, you sound very, very nice. Thank goodness. Holy moly. Now, look, I'm going into this. Look, without a doubt, your libertarian view doesn't seek to displace what we got, but somehow it's a source of unity rather than division. Big statement. What are you talking about?
Well, I think that America, if I understand your question right, Barry, I think America is extremely blessed in having the Constitution. Because, the Constitution was written by a bunch of conservatives. And they were conserving their actually liberal, in the proper sense of that word, with a small L, tradition. And, the fact that we have this document, not only as a piece of law, but as part of our culture, as part of our consciousness, to refer back to, I think it can be a uniting basis for us politically. And, and I believe that the left and the right can unite around the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
But, hold on a second. First of all, left and right to me are very spurious. All right?
Sure enough.
Where are they unite again?
The values of the Constitution, and especially the Bill of Rights, form a great basis of unity if we deploy them properly.
Wow. And this is in your book, huh?
Yes. Actually, that thing I've just said is kind of very much something I discuss in the final chapter of the book. And I end the book with something I called a remonstrance of the people of the United States of America. And it's in the style of Magna Carta and our Constitution, but for our time, to speak to the tyranny that we live under today.
Wow. Now, look, folks, I'm going to be, thank goodness, I'm going to quote you. Oh, no, this is actually a quote from Jeffrey Tucker, but I assume he's right. Here's the quote. The implication is that it is absolutely necessary for the whole of society to be converted to a libertarian vision. Now that is really broad, and I don't know if it's sustainable.
Well, yeah, I don't think we need to go that far. Jeffrey is a self-identified anarchist.
Oh, Lord.
So, but I was very grateful for his words. But no, I don't think I agree with that, because that's clearly not true. based on history. I mean, look at what America did, against the British back in 1776. They didn't convert all of society to a libertarian vision, but the importance of liberty was something very much core in our culture. In the 1770s, people discussed the ideas of liberty in coffee shops on this continent. We certainly need to get back to that. We certainly need to re-infuse our culture with the values that went into the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I'm not sure that's the same thing as... say again?
After watching this election, I say to you once again, I think we're pooped. All right, frankly. We're not going to have a cup of coffee and discuss liberty. All right, that's not going to happen.
You know what? I know a lot of people who do that, and it's darkest before the dawn, right? You've got to understand this, that the culture reacts to resist tyranny and claim back its liberty only once it's felt an accumulation of abuse by the establishment of the rights of the people. It happens only every few generations, every couple of hundred years. But we're clearly there now. Look at what's going on. Just look at what's going on. We could be at the beginning.
What is going on? Specifically, what is going on?
As I say, what is going on is that with the politicians, the elites, have gone beyond removing the rights our most fundamental rights that we don't enjoy every day because we don't exercise them, and have started taking down the most basic rights, like this is First Amendment radio, right? Like our First Amendment rights. Loads of people can feel this. Certainly a lot of religious folk can feel this. In other words, the impingement by government is now in the everyday lives of people, in the way people express themselves. You can only do that for so long before you get a reaction towards liberty. And in this book, I present examples throughout our Anglo-historical tradition, of which America is a part, of that happening time and time again. And that is why I'm an optimist. The other reason I'm an optimist is if you say it's all over, that's self-fulfilling, and you completely guarantee it's all over.
Oh, I can say all over, but I'm tired. By the way, First Amendment Radio is quite remarkable. It really is. There aren't many like it out there. Just so you know, it's got a very good producer, and it's different. There aren't many of us out there.
There aren't many of us out there, but the more people who feel that, the rights that they actually enjoy and exercise in their everyday life that they were enjoying yesterday, they're not going to have tomorrow, the more of us there will be. History tells us that. History shows us.
Well, I got to tell you, now, we don't have a lot of time, but the next half hour I'm going to dive into your book. I got I got a critique here and there, but it's an honest critique without screaming. Look, the fact of the matter is you go into all kinds of things about free economy and on money, and it turns out you like money. Honest to goodness, you really like this stuff. If I'm reading it properly, is that right?
Did you say that I like money?
Apparently, according to this, you say it's an essential institution that makes us serve each other in a peaceful and rational way. That sounds like...
Are you reading Jeffrey Tucker again?
Sure am. Has he got it right?
The reason I discuss...
Look, we have to take 3 minutes. Oh, thank goodness you exist, Robin. I was frazzled before. Oh, my goodness. I may not agree with you, but I sure like your rationality. I enjoy it very much. We're going to be back in 3 minutes.
All right, that sounds good.
You got it. all of my books are at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. 9 of them in 3 languages, and just there's a search box right in my last name, Chamish. Chamish. David Cameron, I hear, is keeping up my site, www.barrychamish.com. Robin, plug away. Plug your new book.
Thank you. Okay, well, you can get the new book at ifyoucankeepit.us. Ifyoucankeepit.us. If you order it there, I will personally send you a signed copy. You can also get it on Amazon, but if you do, make sure to get the right book, because believe it or not, 2 books with exactly the same title came out in the same month. So mine is If You Can Keep It by Robin Koerner. My name is spelled Koerner. But the easiest thing... Sorry, go ahead.
All right, what's the title mean, first of all? If you can keep what?
If you can keep it. Well, that's the famous Franklin quote. When they came out of writing the Constitution, Franklin was asked, "What have you given us, sir?" And he was being asked about the form of government. And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And so this book is about why we, the subtitle tells you what it's about, which is why we nearly lost it and how we get it back.
All right, let's go to money now. Now, look, I don't have the book, so I am quoting. I'm quoting the very good review, by the way, by Tucker. Now, according to him, you claim, now this is a quote, in Koerner's rendering, money is a proxy for the realization of human aspirations. That's some quote. What does he mean?
Yeah, that's interesting that he did put it that way. I think I would have put it slightly differently. What I'm actually talking about specifically, when I talk about the magic of the free market, right, I specifically talk about the principle of subjective value. Now, this is an amazing thing. This is why when you go to the store and you buy apples at the grocery store, you say thank you when you take the apples, but the grocery store owner says thank you when he takes your money. Why? Because for you, the apples are more valuable than the money, but for him, the money is more valuable than the apples. Now, as long as we, as a community, as a country, are free to engage in transactions that mutually benefit us because we subjectively value the items in the transaction differently, one valuing the apples more, one valuing the money, then as long as we're allowed to do that without hurting any third parties and without government telling us what we need to do or may not do in that transaction, or indeed corrupting the things that we use in the transaction, such as the money itself, then we can guarantee that we will become more prosperous. And that's that's the magic of capitalism.
Okay, horses. I'll make a claim. It was better 40 years ago. There's something going on that is making life much, much tougher.
What are you referring to? What was better 4 years ago? Tougher in what way?
The money. You had more money, you had more apples. All right?
Right, sure. So the chapter on money, which Jeffrey Tucker did seem to like a lot, I actually, the whole book is framed from this perspective of what's the gap between what people believe about America and their rights and what is true about America and our rights. And one of the huge areas of disparity between what is believed and what is so is that we are a land of opportunity with a true free market. That's completely not true anymore. So that chapter goes into the corruption of our economy and our money and our monetary system. Basically, I'm trying to take the veil of ignorance down from people who think we're a land of opportunity with true capitalism, rather than what we are, which is a highly cronyistic, financially corporatist kind of society.
You bet it is. Now, again, when my great actually, turn of the century, they came to New York and they fought their way There was opportunity. They fought their way out. I don't think it's there anymore. Well, what do you say? Is it there?
Well, of course there is opportunity. I mean, there are there's 350 million Americans who are making opportunities and exploiting opportunities all the time.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
No. Many of them, not all of them. But many of them, I was just about to say, are having to kind of hold it together against the distortion of opportunities in a way that massively favors a very small, highly connected elite. Political elite. I agree.
Okay, we're on the same page now. Look, what you're talking about, tell me if I'm wrong, you have a humanitarian vision of liberty. Do I have that right?
Well, not with a capital H, not in terms of like saying I'm a humanist, but certainly with a little h. Yes, I mean in as much as in the following sense, I do. There are people who make a religion out of libertarianism, and in so doing become dangerous. And I am very wary of those people. The ultimate ends of all politics and political thought is people, is the well-being of the individual. The only moral agent is the individual, right? So, if you want to ascribe to a political philosophy, it has to be within the framework of the ultimate ends of that philosophy have to be people, and we have to check the outcomes of that philosophy against the experiences of people and their ability to express themselves fully, and for those who believe in this way, fully in God's image,
Well, what about people who are lazy?
Well, people are free to be lazy, but it's not, it's certainly not the job of a one-size-fits-all federal government to subsidize their laziness at the expense of hard-working people.
Can you expand a little bit? You mean keep them poor? I got lost.
No. It's certainly nobody's job to be keeping. We want prosperity, right? But the great thing about capitalism and free markets is not just that you have the choice to work and become prosperous by giving other people things that they need. I mean, the great thing about subjective value is it aligns your self-interest with the service of others. That's the great thing about true capitalism rather than cronyist corporatism, right? But you also, in that system, have a choice to work less.
And if that's what you use really good terms there, folks. Corporate cronyism. What are we talking about? Again, don't be shy.
Okay, so there exists an axis, you might say, between political elite and economic elite. The political elite the government have way too much power. They are not within the confines of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which means that it is worth the economic elite paying to corrupt the politics, right? Basically paying for political gifts. You saw this in the writing of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, for example, but you see it also in the military. You see it in lots of different areas, right? This is cronyism. And politicians obviously favor the economic elites because the economic elites favor the politicians in their campaigns with money. Meanwhile, here we the people are not getting a look in. And that's one of the things I talk about. I mean, look at the bank bailouts, right? I actually go into some detail as to how creation... Sorry, go ahead.
In detail now, what year was the crisis and what... well, Lehman Brothers went down, so did Bear Stearns, but J.P. Morgan got bailed out for one. Go into that. What happened?
Well, I think the fundamental issue here is that you have a system of creation of money, on the one hand by banks, the fractional reserve system, and on the one hand by government. And a lot of people don't understand this. The government doesn't tax you so that it can spend. The government creates money by spending into the private economy. It taxes you to take the money out that it's created. Imagine if you could just create money like our government can. If you were the issuer of currency, you wouldn't need to get it from anyone because you would just make it when you spend it. And actually, that is what the government does. So you have to understand this system of money creation to understand how built into our nature of our monetary system is a tendency to drive value and wealth and assets to those elites that create the money, and that is the corporate financial sector and the state. So
I want to ask you about a $20 trillion debt. Now, look, when I was a young man, you balanced your budget. You didn't get $20 trillion into debt. Now, what has gone on, and how do you maintain this so long?
Right. So this is a good question, and so this is the question that I think it's the 4th chapter of my book, gets to directly. The problem is, as I was just kind of indicating, when it comes to government, debt means something different from when it comes to you and me. Because you and I are currency users. The government is a currency issuer, and the government is the only currency issuer, right? So if you want to spend money you don't have, you have to borrow it. The government does not. So when we talk about government debt, what we actually mean is the excess of government spending over time over the amount of money that the government has extracted from the economy through taxation.
That would make sense. But $20 trillion, I don't believe there's a way out unless there's a massive, worldwide debt forgiveness. You can't get out of it.
Well, debt forgiveness is a different thing for governments who have borrowed in their own currency versus those who have borrowed in another currency, right? Because if you borrow in your own currency, you can print the currency to, quote, pay the debt. But that means something very different from you or I paying the debt. However, if you're Argentina, for example, and you've got a debt in US dollars, you actually have to earn the US dollars because you can't print them as the Argentinian government to be able to pay that debt. This is why the EU is in such a different economic situation from the rest of the world. The governments of the EU cannot print the money that they want to spend in excess of revenue. But the rest of the world, that has countries that is sovereign...
hold on. We're talking a disparity here. Look, Greece, Spain, Southern Europe has a very different debt problem than Northern Europe. Explain that, please.
Okay, well, first of all, we have to be clear. I think what you mean, Barry, is, and I think, and you're obviously correct, that the public debt of the countries in Southern Europe, in other words, we're talking about countries using the euro currency now, right? Just to be clear, they have debts that are much higher than the countries in Northern Europe in general. Indeed, it may be that Germany's in running an actual surplus right now. I'm not sure, but yes. So to my earlier point, this is important because this means that Spain and Greece, your examples, have to find ways to raise revenue to cover those debts because Spain and Greece, unlike the United States, can't print the currency that it has debt in. So they have to earn it, just like you and me. What?
What good having that currency?
So one more time, you just went out there on your phone.
What good is using the euro? What's it doing for them?
Well, I would say it's an evil. I would say it's not doing good. And one of the reasons it's not doing good, Barry, one of the reasons it's so awful is that the politicians who have got so much ego and career investment in the euro as a political project that they will let people die on the streets. They will put millions of Greeks and Spaniards into abject poverty if it means keeping together their project and their fragile egos. So it was a huge mistake. I think that not only the people of Europe, but even the governments of Europe did not understand the extent to which they were losing economic control and sovereignty when they adopted the euro and eliminated their own currencies. And I'm thank God that the country of my birth, Great Britain, didn't make that mistake and give up.
It has the pound, but it's leaving the EU.
Yes.
What's that going to... There's got to be consequences.
Yes, there will be consequences. You're quite right. The short-term consequences there'll be large transitionary effects, both economically and politically, and you're already seeing them, right? And those...
they're punishing Britain. Anyone who can punish the places, punishing them. Is that what you mean?
Well, let's put it this way. If the Europeans try and punish the British, it will probably hurt them at least as much as the British. Why? Because Europe exports 10 times as much to Britain as Britain exports to Europe. So the Eurozone needs Britain as a market, at least as much as Britain needs the Eurozone. Most of Britain's exports are actually to the rest of the world. And just to be clear, Barry, and to say something obvious, but something that isn't said enough, there are 180 countries in the world that are not in the Eurozone that trade with the Eurozone. So, they can survive, Britain will survive. Britain is the 5th largest economy in the world. It's absurd to think in the long run that we cannot thrive, that Britain cannot I say we, I'm an American now, but that Britain cannot thrive.
You're forgiven.
Outside the Euro. Yeah.
Look, you're trying to humanize, well, let's call it what you are doing. You're trying to humanize libertarianism, right?
No, close. I'm not advocating an ism in this book, but I am definitely advocating for our God-given, unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are certainly rights that libertarians bang on about, quite rightly all the time, but I'm also happy to call myself a constitutional conservative or a classical liberal. I hate these labels. This book is about unifying enough of the people to be able to stand up against power. Right? And if we divide ourselves into these political tribes with these labels, I can only quote Kierkegaard, who said, if you label me, you negate me. And worse than that, we make political action against corrupt power very difficult. Bear in mind, Barry, that the American Revolution was successfully fought with only 10% of the colonists actively bearing arms and standing up for their rights. They had about 20 to 30% passive support in the culture at the time. That's what you need. That's a critical mass. And as government overreaches into our lives, day after day after day, looking at history, I am sure we can get that 10% again.
What I'm worried about is the 10%. Look, I say these black lives who suddenly matter and shoot up anyone shoot up cops. I say this is being manipulated into something really pretty nasty. It could really expand into something awful.
Well, let's be clear, Barry. It is the job of power to manipulate events to increase power. That's what they do. It's in the nature of the state. It's in the nature of the powerful to use the power to consolidate power. So, yes. But here's the thing. 'Twas ever thus, Barry. 'Twas ever thus. Right. This is nothing new. We have gone from slavery and poverty to, certainly something better, even as this has always been true, right? It is still up to us to, fight for the good. And just because there are people fighting for the opposite...
You know what? This is rare for me, but people have to read your book. By the way, this is very optimistic, and I'm not sure down to earth. Get the book. Push it, please.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, Barry. Please go to ifyoucankeepit.us to order the copy there. And if you order it at ifyoucankeepit.us, I will personally sign it and mail it to you.
And folks, we are archived for a week at libertyarchives.com. If you missed that, you can hear hour 2. Hour 1 was really... Oh, gosh, I'm still recovering from hour 1. Look, the fact of the matter is you're trying to... Basically, it's kind of liberal. When you scratch away everything, you're saying that a wonderful flowering of human dignity comes from your way of thinking. What do you mean by that? By the way, that's in the review. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, look, in a way, I would say that in the introduction that I wrote, I say something about how it's like, we've lost so many rights. I mean, every one of the Bill of Rights that I'm looking at on my wall, it's like the government in the last, certainly since 9/11, has put a red line through all of them, right? But the last one we definitely have in its entirety is our freedom to observe and think. And we're not, as a nation, using that freedom properly. So this book is a primer, is a manual for using that last freedom that we have to take back all of the rest of our freedoms.
I think you may underestimate how worn down by events people have become.
Well, no, I don't think so, actually. I know why you say that. And I know, because I feel that too. I mean, I do feel that too. And it certainly takes an act of will and an act of faith to maintain optimism and belief. But, that is, in what human beings can do. We're all created with a divine spark. It's up to us to remember that. And,
and by the way, this divinity, if it's interpreted well and you don't, let's just say, isolate anyone who doesn't share it, it can work in our behalf.
Of
there,
course.
I say.
Yes.
Nah, it's a bigger point than you know. Look, you call yourself a blue Republican. Why, are you cold or something? What does that mean?
Well, no, let's just be clear. The Blue Republican thing, that was a movement that I was responsible for starting in 2011. I wrote an article on the Huffington Post, so it was targeted at leftists, and I was trying to get them to switch allegiance from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party to help put Ron Paul on the ticket, and I was supporting Ron Paul.
Okay.
I called them blue Republicans because I pulled them from the left. And to my credit, if I may, we were the biggest coalition for Ron Paul in 2011-2012. Think about that. Using some of the principles and techniques in the book, I was able to move hundreds of thousands of Democrats across party lines to vote for a constitutional conservative. Now that's, the campaign were tracking it. They saw the power of what I did. It was an article called "If You Love Peace, Become a Blue Republican Just for a Year." And by coming up with this label, Blue Republican, and giving some of these disaffected liberals a new political identity, I was able to make them comfortably come over. And, that was an important contribution to liberty that I made in 2011-2012, I believe.
Well, what do you just say to the left? Do you know why you're called the left? Because you're the only ones left. Everyone else is smarting up.
Well, maybe a liberal is just a constitutional conservative who hasn't seen the data yet.
Well, Ron Paul didn't make it.
No, but look, Barry, this speaks to another point in my book. He didn't make it to the White House, but he was a large part of a cultural shift. And remember always, and I go into this in the book, culture precedes politics, whether we like it or not. The politicians can't go too far out of the bounds of what the culture allows them to do, what the people allow them to do. Jefferson said it, our Declaration of Independence says it, and it is true, and we must remember it.
Well, we've got a modern state that's kind of gone beyond that, all right? I mean, it doesn't have limits to its power.
Right.
I mean,
and that's because we, the people that form our culture, have allowed them to get away with it. And it has happened in history before, and also in history it has been reversed before.
All right. Now, you're really a very lively... you can hear it in your voice. You've got this
I care about this. I care about it so much, Barry. One of the most important things I say in my book is that liberty is the politics of love with a capital L, agape, divine love. Why? Because as God wants for us, as we want for our spouses, for the people we love, we want for them what we want for ourselves, right? That's what love is, right? Liberty is the politics that says As you wish.
Robin. And by the way, those bleeps mean we're through, but thank divine goodness for you. Wow, did you calm me down? Thank you, Robin Koerner. Folks, you know how to get his book. We are archived for a week at libertyarchives.com, and this is a very Chamish leaving happily. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.